And could this be the week Washington got back on track? That's the question buzzing through the Capitol after the president picked up the phone, picked up the tab, and spent more quality time with rank-and-file Republicans than at any other point in his presidency. The first reviews have been encouraging, and in his Saturday address, President Obama showed some tempered optimism.
Making progress on these issues won't be easy. In the months ahead, there will be more contentious debate and honest disagreement between principled people who want what's best for this country. But I still believe that compromise is possible. I still believe we can come together to do big things. And I know there are leaders on the other side of the aisle who share that belief.
House Speaker John Boehner a bit more skeptical.
I think it's a sign, a hopeful sign, and I'm hopeful that something will come out of it. But if the president continues to insist on tax hikes, I don't think we're going to get very far.
And one of those Republican senators at dinner with the president Wednesday night here on our Powerhouse Roundtable, Senator Ron Johnson of Wisconsin. Good morning. Also the chairwoman of the Democratic National Committee, Debbie Wasserman Schultz, Congresswoman of Florida, our own George Will, Paul Krugman of Princeton and the New York Times, and the White House correspondent for Bloomberg, Juliana Goldman. Welcome to all of you. And let me ask you, Senator, what happened there?
Well, it was a very honest, frank, pretty complete discussion of the problems we face in this nation. President Obama opened it up, really prioritizing the problems, certainly making the point that it's health care, it's Medicare. From my standpoint, the input I provided to him is if we're going to really get to an agreement, this is a good first step. I mean, you have to start meeting with people, you start developing relationships. You got to spend a fair amount of time figuring out what we agree on first. So many times we're talking about different numbers, and we have to first agree on the facts, the figures. One interesting point he made is he said, the problem with Medicare is about $1 of every, basically Americans pay in $1, but they get more than $3 out in benefits. He said people generally don't understand that. They think that money's theirs. And the point I made to him is, Mr. President, you are in a unique position to be able to make sure the American people understand that. We're not going to be able to solve these very difficult problems unless we start laying the groundwork and prepare the American people for the solutions.
So will this lead to negotiation?
I certainly hope so. I got a call from his chief of staff over the weekend to talk about what we need to do in terms of developing the process. So I'll certainly give the president the benefit of the doubt. The other side's not going to go away. If we're going to solve these problems, it's going to have to be done on a bipartisan basis. And I think most Republicans are more than willing to work this president.
We heard from House Speaker John Boehner, George Will, revenue is still the big issue.
And Senator Johnson's leader, Mitch McConnell, has said the revenue question is settled. It was settled in the fiscal cliff, so no more revenues. I'm not sure what you compromise about. The charm offensive, one night dining together at the Jefferson Hotel, follows a long period in which the president has said, Republicans don't just have bad policies, they're bad people that have bad policies. And it's hard to undo that in a night. Now, he needs 5 senators. That's basically what he needs to do. You need 5 justices to get something done in the Supreme Court. He needs 5 Republicans to come over to get to 60 with the 55 Democrats. I think it's unlikely.
Go ahead. He needs far more than that. He has to bring the House along as well. So this has got to be a bicameral. This has got to be a robust process. And again, you got to take that first step. And the president did that. I think Republicans reciprocated.
If the president lays out more far-reaching entitlement reforms on Medicare, for example, will Democrats in the House follow him?
Well, I think what needs to happen, the president's going to come up to Capitol Hill this week and meet with both Republican and Democratic caucuses and conferences and continue the dialogue. I mean, unfortunately, what we've had thus far is a paralyzed Republican leadership, particularly in the House, who's not been able to act, not felt at all that they have enough leeway because of the extremism in the Republican conference to do anything with the president. So reaching out to the rank and file is extremely important. Building those relationships and building up some of that trust, because it's really hard to make tough decisions and reach consensus when there is such a trust gap.
You're as skeptical as George.
I'm really skeptical because this is not about bad personal relations. People are perfectly capable of being polite to each other, being nice, having a nice dinner. This is about a fundamental difference in visions about what America should be.
It's both.
One party really wants to take down the safety net we have. One party really wants to privatize Medicare, wants to, roll back, want to try to privatize Social Security back in 2005. The other party wants somewhat extended and wants Obamacare to go into place, would do more if it could. That's not something you're going to resolve with a few dinners.
Look, both sides understand what a grand bargain is going to look like. Republicans are going to have to give on revenues. Democrats are going to have to give on entitlements. And so there is some case for optimism now that if the president, in trying to build trust, wants these lunches, these dinners, don't become news events that we're covering. But if Republicans see the president moving forward, putting Medicare savings on the table that doesn't just hit providers, but also hits beneficiaries as well, and also going out and selling it to give Republicans some cover, then there could be a sense that you could get some Senate Republicans to help bring the House along as well.
And they'll have to go first, the Senate Republicans.
Yes, let's begin the process right here, right now. Is it conceivable that your caucus, you're from Florida, which is full of old people, known as
Quite a few senior citizens.
known as God's antechamber for a good reason. But anyway,
Now.
is it
Beg to differ.
Is it conceivable that your caucus would consider, with any concessions from the Republicans, raising the age of eligibility for Medicare?
Look, the only way we've made any progress in careening from crisis to crisis in the last several years is because of Democratic votes in the House of Representatives. The Republicans have been able to get absolutely nothing done with their majority. They've needed our members, the majority of our members, to actually sit down, be willing to make political sacrifice, actually spend some political capital. We supported $1.2 trillion in spending cuts, the cuts-only approach to the debt ceiling deal in the summer of 2011. We did that because it was important to not let the country go over and jeopardize the full faith and credit of the United States. We need the Republicans to realize that they are going to have to.
No, but can I just say something? Because is the condition of any Republican support that you have to go for really terrible policies? Because raising the Medicare age is a terrible policy. It raises medical costs. It does very little to improve the budget. It introduces a lot of hardship. Means testing Medicare is a better policy. I don't particularly like it, but it's a better policy. There are other things you can do. There are other ways you can cut. Even I don't like the business about changing, the price index for Social Security, but that's not as bad.
Listen,
of all the things on the table.
Let Senator go and then you
To
go.
say the Republicans haven't done anything is just false. The House has actually passed budgets, with proposals to try and save Medicare, bipartisan proposals, quite honestly. The Senate hasn't passed a budget in over 4 years. Listen, unless we do something, these programs are going broke. It drives me nuts. When I hear people say that Social Security is solvent to the year 2035, it's not. In the next 20 years, it'll be $5.1 trillion more in benefits than they're bringing in payroll
Let me put
tax.
a version of George Will's question to you then. If the president went along with either means testing Medicare beneficiaries, more far-reaching, he's done a little bit already, and also adjusting the consumer price index for Social Security recipients, would you as a senator be open to more revenues?
Listen, if you're taking a look at in a entitlement reform package, actually bringing in revenue for those entitlement reforms, I might look at that. But the fact of the matter is, we already have $1 trillion in middle income tax increases hitting us in Obamacare. They're hidden, but it's middle class. It's certainly true, as well as another $600 billion. So you've already got $1.6 trillion worth of tax increases hitting us in the next 10 years. That's going to harm economic growth. And George, the best way of getting out of this situation is economic growth.
No, first of all, that is completely untrue. There are not $1 trillion in taxes in Obamacare. And what is true is that the president, in his grand bargain, which is still on the table, which Republicans could take him up on right now, has $360 billion more in savings that ensures that we can add solvency to Medicare. Let's look at what entitlement reform is necessary to reduce the deficit. It isn't Social Security. Social Security solvency has to be dealt with. It can be dealt with separately because there is that many years of solvency left in Social Security. So let's not hit the middle class first. Let's make sure that we take a balanced approach to deficit reduction. And no, the Republican leadership cannot dig in and say that we are done with revenue, because we are not. We got $600 billion. The Speaker himself, in his proposal, in the grand bargain discussion they had with the president, had $1 trillion in revenue. And so there is another about $600 billion left that we could do in revenue.
Just a question. you said let's start with the facts, but we've just run aground right there, right? We cannot agree
exactly
on
my point. It made my point. We have got to agree on the facts.
But your facts are false, so we have a problem.
They are not.
Which
They are
fact
not
is
false.
false?
The Social Security thing. Social Security if it has a dedicated revenue base, it has a trust fund based on that dedicated revenue base. You can't change the rules midstream and say, oh, suddenly the trust fund doesn't count.
Here's the problem with the trust. Here's the problem with the trust fund. The federal government owns U.S. Treasury bonds. It's the same thing. Is if you have $20, you spend it. And by the way, that money's spent, it's gone. You write yourself a note for $20, stick it in your pocket and say, I got 20 bucks.
We've done
No, you don't. You have a note that you have to sell in the open market. The trust fund is a fiction. It doesn't, it has no value to the federal government.
If you want to think of Social Security as not just being part of the government, then there's no such thing as a Social Security problem. It's just part of the general budget. And you cannot say on the one hand, Social Security's trust fund doesn't matter. On the other hand, we're going to restrict it to only operating off payroll taxes. But this is garbage. I mean, it's important to realize that the facts that are being brought out here are in fact non-facts. And how do we go from there?
Facts.
Well, as Pat Moynihan famously said, everyone's entitled to their own opinion, but not their own facts. And we're going to start this chimeric negotiation from two sides that can't agree on the most basic thing.
But we are going to have, one second,
that's the first thing we have to
We are going to have a lot more information on the table this week. Hold on one second. We're going to have a lot more information on the table this week. We're going to have budgets put forward in both the House and the Senate. Democrats in the Senate, Republicans led by Paul Ryan in the House. John Carl has more on that.
This one, which again includes those fundamental changes to Medicare, may actually be more controversial than his last one because this time Ryan is promising to balance the budget in 10 years. His last budget didn't balance until way out into the 2030s, and he's doing it entirely with spending cuts. In fact, I am told he will leave the spending levels under the sequester in place for the next 10 years. Meanwhile, the Senate is going to do something that they haven't done in 4 years. They're actually going to release a budget. Senate Budget Chairman Patty Murray is not promising to balance the budget, but she is promising to undo the sequester with a mix of tax increases and spending cuts found elsewhere. George?
Juliana Goldman, nothing from the White House probably until April, no White House budget until April, but Paul Ryan now able to get to balance in 10 years instead of 30, in large part because the economy has been doing better.
Yeah, because he's counting the revenues from the fiscal cliff deal, $600 billion, also savings from the Affordable Care Act as well. But this is an important week for budget talks. The battle lines really are being drawn here, and we are going to see just how far apart both sides are. I think one of the questions for the White House, and this is why they started the charm offensive last week, to start softening the field here, is how they're going to respond to the Ryan budget. They say that they're going to respectfully point out the differences that they have, but the devil will be in the details of how respectful they're going to be. Nobody wants to see a replay of when the president famously gave his budget speech in 2011 and hammered Paul Ryan sitting in the front row there. And so it'll be a test of whether this civility will continue.
So, George, we're going to have everything on the table probably by the end of the week, but my guess is that everyone in both the House and the Senate is still going to be hanging back till the summer to wait and see what really happens when the sequester starts to kick in. And then when we face this next deadline, the government running out of its borrowing authority sometime this summer.
The Republicans like the sequester so far, but so far they like the sequester. And when Senator Murray begins by saying we're going to end the sequester, she's saying we're going to end the one thing Republicans think they've won in the last year in Washington.
Are they going to like it in June?
No, because this is, people talk, the sequester is mostly falling on discretionary spending. Discretionary spending is easy to cut because you just say, let's cut that number until you start to see the consequences. And it will start to build. And it won't just be White House tours. It'll be air traffic delays. It'll be, it'll be a lot of things that people actually value. In some ways, some of my liberal friends are actually also in a way welcoming the sequester because they think that as the effects kick in, it'll remind people why actually we need a government that does its job.
And we'll put more pressure on defense, which could cause some trouble.
And of course, that's the problem. 65% of the budget is off the budget. It's not, it's on automatic pilot. If you ran a business that way and basically said, healthcare, don't worry about what we're spending on that, spend whatever. Same with retirement. You'd be bankrupt in no time. The fact of the matter is the federal government is bankrupt. The only reason it's not functionally bankrupt is because we can print money, and that's what we're doing.
That is the overhang. About the state of the budget, there's a remarkable document that almost nobody noticed, came out yesterday from the Congressional Budget Office, about the budget. And what it said is it's projecting a deficit of $845 billion this year, of which fully half is what they call automatic stabilizers. Low revenue because of a depressed economy, unemployment benefits which are high because of a depressed economy. With a fully recovered economy, the budget deficit would be down to about $420 billion, which is, in fact, a level that is consistent with a stable debt position.
It is government out of the way, and we'll have
the cyclically adjusted budget deficit now is back to what it was in 2006, back to what it was during the height of the housing bubble. So we are, in fact, we have already basically brought the budget under control, and nobody noticed.
For the next 10 years.
What CBO has also said is that if we don't replace this, if the sequester remains, we'll lose about 750,000 jobs. Evidence that a cuts-only approach like the sequester, particularly one that is indiscriminate, takes a meat-axe approach instead of a targeted, responsible approach to spending cuts with balance from closing tax loopholes that only benefit the wealthy and using that to reduce the deficit. Make sure that we also talk about entitlement reform, which, yes, I would be willing to support that if we have a balanced approach. And the only ones who, unfortunately, right now are on the side of cuts only is the Tea Party extremists in the Republican Party in the House and the Senate.
Sequestration is a lose-lose for both sides. For Republicans, to the extent that they're seen as uncompromising to a fault, this is just going to hurt the brand even more. For the president, we're seeing robust job growth, great trends in the economy right now, and the sequester shoe has yet to drop. And to the extent that it starts shedding 750,000 jobs a year to push the economy back, that's bad for the president,
will this, and that's one of the questions, that we saw this robust jobs report this week. Is this going to actually make the sequester less
George,
I don't think the sequester is going to be. I don't think the problem is going to be the fact that it hits the economy, although it will hit the economy. And it's a real shame because it looks like finally the engine is really catching. And just at the moment the engine is catching, somebody is pulling the plug. To make
At what point do we restrain the growth in government? At what point?
Spending growth has been exceptionally low under Obama. We just need to say that.
We're up 23% of our economy in terms of government.
With your adjective about the robust growth? If the workforce participation rate were as high today as it was just 12 months ago, the unemployment rate would be 8.3%. If the workforce participation rate were as high today as it was when Mr. Obama was inaugurated, the unemployment rate would be over 10%.
The counter-argument to that would be if all the government jobs weren't cut, the unemployment rate would be
and we are still 3.1 million jobs below the high point in November 2007. 3.1 million jobs. And the fact is, the average growth after 13 quarters post-World War II recession or recovery is over 18%. Under Ronald Reagan, 19%. Under Obama, it's about 7% because of all the regulations.
Because of the detour we were in.
Our friends on the other side of the aisle, unfortunately, like the senator, continue to root for our economy to not be doing as well. The fact is we've had 37 straight months of job growth in the private sector. 4 of the last 5 months have been 200,000 plus jobs a month. Look, I want to start where we began, which is that there is a trust deficit between the two sides. I am someone...
And big differences that have been displayed here for the last 18 years.
So let's agree on numbers first.
No. That's the problem.
We turns out, not if you want to.
Hold on. Right? We're going to have to take a break. Finish your thought.
There is a trust deficit. And the way, in my experience, in 20 years as a legislator, that you close that trust gap is to sit down and continue to talk. I'm a lot more likely to reach consensus and agree on the facts when I have spent some time getting to know and working with the other side, and we've got to make sure that continues.
The gulf is still wide. We do have to take a quick break. Up next, Jeb Bush back in the national spotlight with a new book on immigration and an open door to running in 2016. He joins us next. Plus, Mr. Paul goes to Washington, setting Twitter on fire for this filibuster on drones, and Facebook's Sheryl Sandberg sparking a fierce debate on women in work. The roundtable is going to weigh in on all that when we come back. So everyone, George Will is here, as always. Also, Paul Krugman of the New York Times in Princeton, Juliana Goldman of Bloomberg News, and Senator Ron Johnson of Wisconsin, Congresswoman Deborah Wasserman Schultz of Florida. And George, you heard Governor Bush there. He said it wasn't a political week. It wasn't all that rocky, but he is encouraged on immigration reform.
Well, maybe, and in part because he really did clarify the argument. Everett Dirksen, who was the leader of Senate Republicans for many years, said, I have my principles, and one of my principles is flexibility. And Mr. Bush was flexible on treating the 11 million who are here already. The immigration debate today is occurring after 2 years in which net immigration from Mexico, which is the most important source of immigrants, has been approximately zero. Most important capital is not Washington, D.C., it's Mexico City, where they have their economy doing A, better than ours, and B, being a magnet to help people stay there. So what we're really arguing about is what to do about the 11 million illegal immigrants who are here already. And I think what we learned this week was any plan that does not envision as an endpoint citizenship for those is not going to work.
It's not bottom line, that's right.
So I just learned something really important from this interview about Jeb Bush, which is he's one of those people who says frankly just before he delivers a big whopper. So that frankly we're going to deal with the deficit by economic growth. Come on, he has no plan. No, Anyway, that was impressive. It's an object lesson. I mean, he's just shown us the perils of political pandering. He wrote a book for the immigration debate the way it was a few months ago and got caught flat-footed by the way it shifted. But no, this is moving in a favorable direction. We seem to be moving towards some kind of...
He felt the pressure to move towards citizenship.
That's right. It's amazing. Actually, I have to say, this is one of these things that has really been an amazing positive development. Most of these other things, I don't think we're getting anywhere on the budget, but on immigration, I think we are.
You agree with that?
No, I think the movement on the immigration front is positive, and I think the bottom line is whatever we do, we can't create incentives for more immigration. I think that's the bottom line. But I want to talk a little bit about growth because you mentioned that as well. Let me defend it. From 2000,
One sentence,
okay, but I got to get back to growth.
Okay, go ahead.
Having a bit of experience with Governor Bush, being the former governor of my state, I think we saw quite clearly that what he did this week was get caught in a tangled web of his own evolving ambition. I'm not sure why you have to write a book on your views on immigration reform to conclude that we need legal immigration to be more cost-effective and more incentive than illegal immigration. I mean, at the end of the day, we do have an opportunity for progress. We have an opportunity for progress because President Obama got 71% of the Hispanic vote in this country, and we have, for a long time, needed to reach consensus on comprehensive immigration reform, have undocumented immigrants go to the back of the line, pay taxes, pay back taxes, and make sure that we recognize that they are part of the essential part of the backbone of our economy.
This is one of those areas where a bipartisan group in the Senate is working to come up with a plan. About 8 senators working on it. The White House encouraged by this as well.
Well, look, with Jeb Bush, I mean, one of the reasons that you did see the brouhaha this week is because the Republican Party, whether he decides to run in 2016 or not, is looking to him for leadership on the issue. And to the point, when you asked him about what Senator Lindsey Graham said, splitting hairs over a legal pathway to legalization or a pathway to citizenship, that muddles the message for Republicans and it muddles policy, and it sends a mixed message to Hispanics who Republicans are trying to court as well. The White House does see progress, but at the same time, the president met this week with religious leaders around immigration, and he told them that the Congress is unlikely, the Senate's unlikely to meet the March deadline, and that they're unlikely to come forward with something until April.
In April.
Yeah.
You said it's unclear, and it is unclear whether Jeb Bush is going to run in 2016. Pretty clear after this week, though, that Senator Rand Paul is going to run in 2016. Had that remarkable moment on the Senate floor, 13-hour filibuster. The point he was focusing on at first was he wanted the president to clarify the authority he had to use a drone against American citizens on American soil. Finally got a no from Eric Holder. At the end of the day, we had Eric Holder writing towards the middle of the debate. It has come to my attention you have now asked an additional question. Does the president have the authority to use a weaponized drone to kill an American not engaged in combat on American soil? The answer to that question is no. Sincerely, Eric H. Holder, Jr. But, George, this filibuster became about far more than that over the course of the day.
It started about drones, but it really went on to a re-examination of Bush-era foreign policy, and which necessarily means executive discretion. And it went on from there to a general critique of executive discretion and domestic policy as well. This really was a revival from the new guys in the Senate, one of which is sitting here, Cruz of Texas and Lee of Utah and Flake of Arizona and all the rest, who are rediscovering the roots of modern conservatism, which were in the critique of executive power under Franklin Roosevelt and then Lyndon Johnson. Traditional conservatism goes right back to the 30s when modern conservatism was born in reaction against the New Deal, has been congressionally oriented. And a deep suspicion, going back as far as the American Revolution against executive prerogatives in George III, deep suspicion of executive power generally.
But it did reveal a big split right now inside the Republican Party. You saw Senators Lindsey Graham and John McCain go into the floor. I want to show a little bit of that. One exchange they had where Rand Paul was talking about the possibility that a president might have, for instance, taken out Jane Fonda.
No one will ever forget Jane Fonda swiveling around in North Vietnamese armored guns, and it was despicable. That's one thing if you want to try her for treason, but are you going to just drop a drone Hellfire missile on Jane Fonda?
To somehow allege or infer that the President of the United States is going to kill somebody like Jane Fonda or someone who disagrees with the policies is a stretch of imagination, which is frankly ridiculous.
And Senator Johnson, we also saw Senator Graham go to the floor and say he didn't remember a lot of his colleagues raising these questions about the drone policy under President Bush.
Yeah, I don't think I really want to get in the middle of that. I mean, George is right. This is an argument about presidential power, about due process. But, you know...
You did join the filibuster, though.
Sure, because I think Senator Paul had the right to either have a vote or get that question answered. I mean, it was amazing it went on for 13 hours. But, you know, what is also at the heart of this drone activity is this administration has only captured one terrorist, detained them and tried to get, you know, information out of them. If we're going to win this war against Islamic terrorism, there's basically been one high-value individual that's been captured and detained to get information out of them.
One this week.
Yeah, but it's been very basically the process has been using the drones and killing terrorists. What we should be doing is a robust intelligence capability of actually capturing and detaining. But they don't do that because they want to close down Guantanamo. By the way, I've been there. It's a first-class facility. We really need to gain. We need to capture people. We need to gain intelligence.
Come on, we brought Osama bin Laden to justice. We have the spokesperson for al-Qaeda, his son-in-law, in custody this week with a 27-page statement. We've decimated the ranks of al-Qaeda. We've made them essentially ineffective in the sense that they aren't in a position to be able to wreak the kind of 9/11 havoc that was their hallmark when just before the mid-2000s. We have got to make sure that we strike a balance. I'm a legislator, and I jealously guard the legislature's prerogative, but it has always been clear that the Obama administration's position has been that you cannot pursue a non-combatant American on American soil. That was
the definition of what it is gets into what is a combatant at that time, and this has created some
question being answered
among liberals who wish the administration could be more transparent.
That's right. There's a lot of I mean, by the way, it was a very weird way to start the debate. I mean, that specifically about drones and on American soil. I mean, does that mean that it's okay to kill me with a drone while I'm visiting Paris, or it's okay to kill me in the United States as long as it's a sniper, but not a drone? It was a very peculiar way to phrase the question. Yeah, I mean, Democrats are very much, I think many of them are very uneasy. They really don't like this sort of Bush-created, weird, large discretionary power on the part of the president to go after people without any kind of the formal, any of the formal machinery that we normally associate with war. It's a difficult world out there, but a lot of liberals have some sympathy with the question. But I think can I just say, I think it's a very, very strange position. Let me caricature it, which is to say it's bad for the president to go out there and kill people with drones. He should waterboard them instead. I mean, that's a very, that suggests to me that a lot of the people who are part of that filibuster have a very odd notion of what is right and what is wrong in presidential policy.
The White House also makes the argument that they have actually sharply constrained the president's power here. They just can't talk about it yet, and they're struggling to figure out what they can say.
They are struggling, and this week not only exposed fissures in the Republican Party, but among the president's own party as well. And I think it is the canary in the coal mine for the enhanced scrutiny that the president is going to find from groups like the ACLU, from human rights groups who don't want Rand Paul to own this issue. And the White House is trying to figure out how they are going to answer some of these questions and trying to balance greater transparency. And you can expect to hear from the president about this because he is a constitutional law professor, and he does want to make sure there are adequate checks on presidential power, not just for himself,
but for his... I think we will be seeing more. I think you're right about that.
Something completely different on this subject, which is that I think what was great about what Rand Paul did was that we actually had some real debate. I I mean, that's almost
The real filibuster.
We can all agree on
and
that.
we don't even, and
Yeah.
in the House of Representatives, we are paralyzed by timed,
Oh, that is
canned
false.
speeches. That's not. No, it's not false. The reality is all we ever do on both sides is give.
Trust me, is the Senate that is dysfunctional.
Well, the process doesn't allow us to have real debate.
A
and
great
we need more of
American
it.
columnist, the late Murray Kempton, said the similarity between American politics and professional wrestling is the absence of honest passion. And what you saw in Rand Paul was honest passion, and it stood out from all, as you
And
say, all
George,
the
you've also
rhetoric.
made the point that this is captured, that he is capturing, and part of the reason he's going to have a lot of energy if he does indeed run for president in 2016, he's captured this libertarian moment, which does transcend party lines in some ways.
It does. It goes to the decriminalization of marijuana. It goes to same-sex marriage, a general sense that the government is monitoring us and regulating us too much.
And that is a great debate. You know, when people are responding to liberty and freedom and the protections of our Constitution and of our amendments, the Fifth Amendment, I think that's a very good thing for American democracy.
One other big debate being sparked already is being sparked by Sheryl Sandberg, the COO of Facebook. She's got a new book called Lean In, Women, Work, and the Will to Lead. Not even out yet. I guess it's out tomorrow, but it's already made the cover of Time magazine this week, and it captures some of the debate, the flavor of the debate so far. Don't hate her because she's successful. Sheryl Sandberg is going to be on GMA tomorrow, on 60 Minutes tonight, talking about her ideas.
They start leaning back. They say, oh, I'm busy. I want to have a child one day. I couldn't possibly, take on any more. Or I'm still learning on my current job. Plenty of women are as ambitious as men. But I am saying, and I want to say it unequivocally and unapologetically, that the data is clear that when it comes to ambition to lead, to be the leader of whatever you're doing, men, boys outnumber girls and women.
Well, and that is what is setting people off already. Look at some of this reaction. You see some of the headlines. I want to go to you, Congresswoman Schultz. You see Maureen Dowd, pom-pom girl for feminism. Washington Post, Sandberg's Lean In campaign holds little for most women. Forbes, leaning in doesn't fit, so it's actually broken for working women. She actually asked you to give your Lean In story.
And I proudly did so. And just look at the reaction, what the reaction to Sheryl Sandberg's book has done. It's evidence of how it is so hard for women to wear our ambition on our sleeve, to pursue our dreams, to believe that we can reach the top of any profession and that we should always shoot for the stars. That's how my parents raised me to believe that I could grow up and be anything I wanted to be. And what Sheryl Sandberg has done for little girls, my two daughters and little girls across America, is written a book, a manifesto that says it is okay to be ambitious, it's okay to want to have it all, that balance is important, but that there is nothing wrong with trying to have a full professional life and be a leader and succeed as a woman, and also having a full family life. You don't have to choose. It can be both and.
But some of her critics, Juliana Goldman, have said that it's in that Anne-Marie Slaughter in today's New York Times book review suggests that she seems to be emphasizing the kind of real constraints women feel inside the workplace, institutional constraints.
So in 2011, when Sheryl Sandberg gave the commencement address at Barnard College, my alma mater, a bunch of my girlfriends and I, we had for days a running email chain about how empowering this message is. And for someone like myself, I don't have children, I'm not married, but I think about my career and I think about how someday I do want to strike that balance. And so it's so important right now to be able to have role models, women having this discussion like Sheryl Sandberg, like Anne-Marie Slaughter, so that we can think about how we're going to be making choices down the road.
I take it there's been a lot of resonance about this phrase she has, don't leave before you leave, which is sort of to take yourself preemptively out of the work. Did that strike a chord with you?
Yeah, I mean, I think about, last May getting a call from the White House saying, okay, in 24 hours, you're going to be going on a secret trip to Afghanistan. If I had a family, how would I be dealing with that? How am I going to be able to have this career, pursue this path, and want that someday? And it doesn't mean that I can't be doing that now.
I deal with that every day. I have 3 kids, twin 13-year-olds and a 9-year-old. I have a husband who is an amazing dad who understands that equal parenting is important. He has an employer, George, that understands that making sure that he is able to have a balanced family life and be there as a professional is important. And those are all, it is a team effort. through employers, through parenting, through making sure that our educational process encourages girls as equally as boys, and through girls having role models like Sheryl Sandberg who tell them it is okay to be ambitious and you should go for it when you
Where
can.
do men fit in this debate, George?
Well, Sheryl Sandberg says there's an ambition gap, and she sounds a little bit like Professor Henry Higgins saying, why can't a woman be more like a man? Maybe men should be more like women in the sense that they should be more like your husband. I mean, my 4 biggest achievements in life are named John, Jeff, David, and Victoria, the children. And I think we all feel the same way. And when Anne-Marie Slaughter causes a huge national uproar with an article in, I guess, Atlantic saying women can't have it all after all, I have news for her. No one can have it all.
Yeah, I just think, the reaction is, people are saying, I haven't read the book, but people are saying, well, Sheryl Sandberg is not talking enough about not talking about all the problems. Well, what are you asking of her? She's writing a book that is making the point that there is this, that women, some women who could be doing much more, lean back, don't do enough. She's not talking about the problems of every woman. That's okay. I mean, apparently it's a really powerful book for those who found a message in it. We're asking, this in itself is a way of telling us about just how difficult, how unprepared we are still to have women as a full part of our society.
It just means that we need to make sure that for women in every walk of life, they have an opportunity to succeed and achieve their dreams. And it isn't only, I don't think Sheryl's book is written only for wealthy women of privilege. It's written for all girls and all women who have big dreams, who we should encourage to dream big dreams, and we should help make sure there's a path for their ability to succeed.
Any argument there?
Listen, this is a tough balance. I've been surrounded by strong, capable women, my mother, my wife, women that I work with. It's a tough job, and it's great to have wonderful examples. Power of example is great.
No question about that, and we're going to be hearing a lot more of her and a lot more of her example. Thank you all for a terrific roundtable.